Talk. I am your hostess with the mostest today, Wendy Stuart. Now, a lot of you are wondering, where is your co-host, Wendy? Tym Moss. Well, Tym was abducted by aliens. This is a God's honest truth. He went out to Indiana and the mothership came down. They found him in a cornfield and that was the end of that. Oh, I'm just kidding. You know that. But Tym is off doing some other projects. So I am here by my lonesome. But you know what? I'm in New York City, so I'm never alone. And I'm here at Pangea today, which is the center of the universe. So I hope everybody had a really great week. I have to give a shout out here. You all know that I make documentary films, even though it's been a bit. And I was honored along with my husband who passed away in March, Alan Kaplan, at the Black Bear Film Festival on Friday evening and really given an award. And you know what? I love keeping Alan's name out there. He and I did a lot together. We're totally into the arts. So it was really wonderful to get that award. And then, oh, I'm going to share this with you. It's a little personal detail, but I have been walking around with a wisdom tooth that was split in half for months because they wanted so much money in New York, $1,500. And you know what? That's a trip. So I'd much rather go on a trip than deal with a wisdom tooth. And I can happily tell you, I am here to celebrate the fact that I was able to get that wisdom tooth removed by a wonderful, wonderful dental surgeon in Pennsylvania for $400. We all know I love a bargain, right? A bargain is a bargain, whether it's something you're wearing, whether it's tickets that you get, orchestra seats at a low price, or a wisdom tooth removed. So, yeah. Oh, Saturday. Saturday, you can find me at the Jersey City Pride Fringe Festival. I know that's a mouthful. You know, when I think about it myself, I really, Jersey City Pride Fringe Festival. Many people are saying, but didn't Jersey City have their Pride back in July? They did. But this is a separate event, and it is hosted by Evan Lawrence, who does a tremendous job, and a bunch of us will be performing. I'm doing 4 numbers. It's a lot of numbers. And we all know the trouble I have with lyrics, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So we will be hosting the show in Van Horst Park, which I was told you just take the PATH train to Grove Street and then walk a little bit. I don't have my little map with me, but you can go visit my website or look at me on Facebook and I'll tell you how to get there. Just don't forget to contact me if you plan on coming on Saturday. And I'm very excited. On Sunday, I'm doing a film and I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So I can't tell you anything about it, but it's a very fun role and it's comedic. We all know I love to do comedic, right? Because that's my thing. So, oh my God. My guest today, so some of you are going to remember this person. They were on TriVersity Talk, and I met them actually out in Pennsylvania, and they really interested me because, you know, it's odd when you find a combination of somebody with a heavy-duty scientific background, a PhD in neuroscience, and then, you know, their passion has always been to write books, and now they're writing books that involve the supernatural, gay characters, and they're doing research that they can historically back up. It's a very interesting genre. And, you know, I'm very excited to welcome here today, Patrick Field. Come on in to our little studio and center of the universe. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God. You're always a pleasure to have. First of all, Patrick lives in a haunted house. He doesn't mind me telling you that. I know, I love that because you have this whole scientific background.
Yeah.
You're an oxymoron. You're what we call an oxymoron because, you know, like it's like math, science. You scoot over a little bit more here so we fill the frame. There we go. So this writing thing of yours, your first book that you wrote, you were still teaching.
Yeah. So long story short, I'm the oldest of all the grandchildren, my mother's side of the family. And so they used to tell all these stories about me when I was a kid. Like, I was a very precocious child and did a lot of really like well, I don't know where I would be on, but they would classify me now as, but I was sort of ADHD.
Right, but they used to call that precocious.
Exactly. But
Right.
yeah. And so I was like, I heard him a lot, and I said, this would make an interesting memoir. So I started writing it, and then unfortunately, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
And I knew that I wanted to get this finished in order for her to be able to read it while she was going through chemotherapy, and
like a gift to her too.
Well, thank you so much.
And what she had to put up with, I'm sure you weren't easy to deal with as a kid.
Well, and I will tell you, in the beginning of it, I dedicated to my mother, and then I said afterwards, I said, after having Prince Patrick, which was the name of the book, which is also
this is Prince Patrick right here, Prince Patrick,
and that was my nickname.
Well,
that was not something I gave myself. All my relatives called me that because they said, well, and I said in the dedication, I said, after having Prince Patrick, I said, why did you have any more children? I mean, because you were a handful. I was a handful.
Right.
But as I always said, I was never mean. It was just, I was like, the scientist in me was very curious.
Well, it's the need to explore, the need to lift up the rock and find out what's underneath.
Right, or pull the wings off.
I don't even want to say the fly analogy. Pulling the wings off. Did you really do that?
I really did.
Oh no, Patrick!
I used to do weird things to the animals, but anyway, so I'm not gonna talk about that. But yeah, so I started writing it, and then when that came about, I was like, okay, now I have a real goal, and so I got family involved. My husband's niece, who was a very gifted photographer, who worked over at Vogue at the time.
Oh, you're kidding!
Oh no, she was working at Vogue at the time, and she was like, "I'll help you with this." So we put together this amazing cover, which is a picture of me when I was a kid and she superimposed the crown on it. And I was able to give it to my mother, and then she read it when. And of course, being the stoic Southern woman that she was, I said, "So what did you think of it, Mom?" And she just got very choked up. She says, "It was very nice." It was like we don't gush. We don't gush.
Right. We don't gush when we're like stoic like that.
No, Southern wasps don't gush. So it was like, but I was really glad. But what was interesting about it, and I think I told you this before, I was like, okay, well, maybe this will be just the only book that I ever wrote. I mean, it was kind of
that's interesting because like there's a lot of people I talk to and they had all these books in them. You had this one book.
Just the one.
And they're you weren't like burning to write another one.
No, it took it was actually several years before. Wow. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be like Harper Lee, not to compare myself to Harper Lee, but I was like, maybe it'll be like that. I'll be like one book, and that'll be it. And then but I don't know. Just to give again, making a long story short, I had this.
Oh, you can make your long stories long here. We do. We go down rabbit holes and everything. So So you had a book in your head.
Yeah, I had a book in my head, and I was like, it was one of these things. Like I felt like if I don't get this out of my head, it's going to explode.
Right.
And I was like, all right, I need to write this book. So I started writing, and I was just like, and then it was so like I'd heard all these things about people having writer's block and about this, and I was like, this was so easy. It just flowed out of my head.
Wow.
And there were lots of things going on, that was, and it was the first book was a ghost story, and it took place in Maine, and Maine was a place that we went to when I was a kid, for vacations. And I have a big thing about dark shadows.
Well, and you notice like Stephen King, how many things take place in New England is the most haunted place in the world.
And Maine,
Maine in particular, right?
So I was like, I wanted to contribute to it. And then it kind of really took off on its own in the sense that I wrote this book, and I had an idea about how it was going to end, and it changed. The ending changed. And it was because of how the characters were being written.
Right.
It was like the ending that I wanted to give, which I would call an HFE, the Hollywood, FUs, you know what I mean?
Right.
Ending. I don't want to be nasty.
Yeah, it's okay. Everybody says anything they want on this show. But the ending was not your original intent.
Exactly. And it was written by the characters. And I was like, this is really interesting. I've never experienced, it was almost like they took over.
Wow.
The character took over my head, and I wrote it. And when people read it, they hated it because, again, everybody's so used to the Hollywood ending and everybody being happy. But what I wrote was like, it would not have done justification for the characters if I had done that to them.
And the first book was called
The Malevolent.
That was The Malevolent.
Yeah,
That's what I thought your first book was.
Yeah.
People hated the
ending. And so interestingly enough, I just resubmitted it to a publishing company, and I just got word that they're going to pick it up. So it's going to get reprinted. I'm going to have to pull back because I self-published that one.
Right.
I have to pull it back, and then they're going to publish it. But I gave them 2 endings. So I'm not sure which ending they want.
So funny. It's like a film, right? It's like when you write a screenplay and you have to give different endings.
So if they want whatever ending they want, they can have.
Let them have. You know, they're getting your book.
Both. Wouldn't that be interesting to have both?
I have never read a book that's been like that. You'll notice magazines like Harper's Bazaar changes the cover. They'll send out 3 different covers now. That's something that's happened the last couple of years, but I never heard about anyone doing it with like, how do you know which book to buy then?
I know. Well, and then the other thing is
well, you can have people vote on it. Wait, I just thought of a great social media campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Why not let them vote on how they want?
Well, you know what? Whatever. You know, as far as I'm concerned, being a writer, like anybody else in the arts, is like whatever gets it sold, whatever gets out there, whatever you want.
I totally agree with you. The fact, you brought up something really interesting. I do want to move forward and discuss your other books, but you self-published initially. How did you get your book picked up by a publisher?
Oh, okay. So
people always ask that.
Yeah. Well, it actually was the 3rd book, which is Servant, which is the one that got published first, and that was actually my 3rd novel.
And I interviewed you about that book on TriVersity Talk. Yeah.
Right. And so, interestingly enough, I'm not sure what it was, because I did the same thing that I did for the first 2 books. You know, you get on something called Query Tracker, where you try to find like a agent. That's what I did first, and
you send out a query letter.
Yeah, and then you send out query letters to all these publishers, and you get an idea based on that, about what publishing companies would be, that are receiving submissions.
Because not all of them, right? That's a tough one.
Right. Well, unfortunately, if you want to get into the big league, like with HarperCollins or
Penguin,
Penguin, Random House, you have to have an agent. And so that's what I was trying to get, was an agent first. But then,
okay, so this is going to horrify you. Yeah. So the literary agent that someone had gotten for my book hired my daughter that summer as an intern. My daughter comes home with like 2 shopping bags full of books, and they sat in those bags the whole summer. I'm like, Kyle, what are you supposed to be doing with those? She said, well, Mimi asked me to go through the books and tell her what I thought, and then she'll get back to the ones that have potential. My daughter didn't take one of those books out of the shopping bag. Right. I tell this story, and I tell authors this because, well, you never know who's on the other end. A year later, those books were still sitting in the shopping bags in my apartment. And this is people's work.
Yeah. But they're expecting this to be,
but we know that this can happen.
Yeah.
So how did it happen for you?
So, well, I think it was the source, because when I wrote the query letter, I said this is actually inspired by true events that have happened in my home to myself, my husband, as well as guests. And we've had some very interesting breakfast conversations, I got to tell you. After some
with
people,
the ghosts or the guests?
with the guests that are staying with us, they'll be like, we need to tell you about something that happened last night. And then I will look at my husband, and we'll look at each other. We're like, oh, here we go. Right. And it's happened more than once. So I think that might have been it. It was kind of like, whenever you inject something that's
highly personal, and it's
highly personal,
the curiosity
to you. And then when you say it's something that's going to be the supernatural, like the occult, you're like, okay, now you've really pulled somebody in. Right. But my editor at the Wild Rose Press, that's
shout out to Wild Rose Press.
Yes, Wild Rose Press, excellent. And Leah Shizis is my editor. And
so you found Leah through query letters.
Yeah, through well. You query with them, and then they will respond back to you if they are interested or not. And what she did was,
I love the word query.
Isn't that weird? I know query, and it's not
query.
Queery.
Right, I know, but you know it really is a play on words.
It's hilarious.
I'm gonna go query. So you put out the query, and she bit.
Yeah, she did.
Over the supernatural thing. Was that the hook?
Well, that's the hook. Okay, so there you go. you write a pitch, you write a pitch paragraph, and you give them. Usually, they ask you for 10 pages or 3 chapters.
Right.
Depends upon what it is. And actually, interestingly enough, for Servant, I had 3 different companies that were interested in it, and they all asked me for the manuscript. So if they're interested, then they ask you for
the whole
thing.
kit and caboodle. And you think it's because you talked about the supernatural?
I think that might have been part of it, and I think that also was kind of like this new sort of genre that's sort of developing. And so, but she was the one who came back and said, first, you said, I'm ready to send you a contract. And
it's just like, right.
It was crazy.
Were you like turning cartwheels?
I was. And here's the most amazing thing. She told me, she said, it was the beginning of May, and she said, I'll let you know by the end of the month, whether, what it looks like in terms of the manuscript. And I'm like, of course, I'm so excited now, but I got these other 2 companies that are also looking at it, but they haven't responded like she did. And in 2 weeks, she contacted me. She says, I'm ready to give you a contract.
I want this. Wow.
So it was 2 weeks even earlier than that. So I was like, wow. When you go from writing 2 books and just pouring your heart out,
I know, it's amazing,
and then sending it out there, and I mean, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of
it's a ton of work. And you use what did you use? Query? What is it called?
Query Tracker. Well, that's how you find your agents. But basically, that will give you an idea about what and that also what companies will accept unsolicited manuscripts.
Right, because it's about
and they're all independent, and that's okay because that's what.
But that's what you totally want.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this, whether it's solicited versus unsolicited. How are you supposed to find someone that's new and interesting and hot if you don't take unsolicited? If everyone's taking, you know what I'm saying? If everyone's buying the same kind of steak, and no one notices that, like, there's a package of steak tips sitting there that might be quite nice.
Well, I will tell you this. I think from listening and talking to other authors, a lot of what happens in terms of how people get agents now is that you have to graduate from a school that has a writing program, because then you have all the, then you have all the, then you have all the the elements.
Right. Okay. So this is going to I'm going to have my gag moment, and I'm sorry Tym Moss isn't here to have it with me. Tim and I constantly complain on this show, what happens at Broadway when you read the bios of these actors. They're wonderful. They've all gone to Carnegie Mellon. They've gone to Yale. They've gone to this. Meanwhile, there are people out there that are just so unbelievable that we've seen off Broadway or off Broadway, and they cannot get in the door. And what Patrick is sharing with us here today is, it seems to be the same.
It's the same thing for writers. And so if you're not in a writing program or if you are in a program where you have, like, for example, like your professor or the department chair, and they have connections, that's the only way I can think of it is, I mean, or it's just happenstance, but it didn't work for me. So I stopped doing that. And I was like, it was the best thing I could have done, but because I really wasted a lot of time doing that. And so
no, but the thing is, you had I know a lot of people that spend time doing that and they didn't have the breakthrough. They continue to self-publish. We all know. So you can self-publish. It's very hard getting your book marketed and all of that. This is brilliant that this happened for you in this way.
And I was really, and again,
and you had three companies.
You're going from nothing to 2 books, and then the three, and then. But Leah came through, and we had the connection, and it was like, it's a really great relationship that I have with my editor. And I also need to shout out as well about this, and this is for writers out there: get a copy editor. You need a copy editor. You need someone looking at what you've written from a different perspective, who also is very good with grammar, who is also very good with syntax.
I had to use somebody totally. We'd be on the phone from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. He'd be up at 6 a.m., which would be 9 o'clock my time.
Right.
And I would read him everything I wrote, and then he would correct it all, and my thoughts are jumbled. I don't have ADD, but I got too much in my brain.
So he could solidify it.
He had to solidify it. And I learned something about a timeline.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're writing a memoir, like, how do you set it all up? But that's what my copy editor did.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that you get a copy editor, because I definitely believe that if I had not had a copy editor who looked at it,
organized
Andy, There's your shout out. Andy.
Does Andy have a last name?
Ignelzi.
Andy Ignelzi.
In
Thank
Chicago.
You. In Chicago.
In Chicago.
Thank you for being the copy editor for Patrick's book.
She's a family friend. She's a friend. She's my husband's best friend's sister. And yeah, so I mean, she's been amazing. And I know that one of the things that I was told was that when they start reading your copy, if there are lots of grammatical errors, they will stop reading it. No matter how interesting, no matter who you are, they'll stop reading it. So you can make sure that the grammatical copy is good. Also, there's something that I learned. It's like active voice versus passive voice. Right. That's a very big thing.
Tell us what that means.
So active voice, like for example, is like, well, okay, I could say like, well, Wendy and I, we interviewed today, or Wendy is interviewing me right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because it's in the present tense and it draws people in.
Exactly.
I knew that.
Yeah. But when you're writing, it's like it's so.
No, you're right.
Yeah, it's a passive voice. Yeah. So I've just learned a lot about that, and I'm very, very grateful to all the people that have, and my beta readers, people that read for you and give you the feedback and things like that.
How do you find your beta readers?
Well, a lot of times I think it's like people will reach out to you.
Okay.
Like on the latest book that I just worked on, actually someone loved servants so much they said, I will be a beta reader for you on your next thing.
Wow. So, and they're called beta readers. See, I'm learning something here.
Yeah,
I didn't know about this.
And they will read it for you and they will give you their feedback. And I had on Servant, I had one of my colleagues where I was teaching, gave me this amazing, Daniela, shout out to you.
Daniela.
I had this amazing colleague who gave me so much amazing feedback. And so I incorporated that into it. And then my copywriter, then my copy editor got it after that. And so then the rest is history. Right. But it does require a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Steps.
And it's kind of like the village thing. You know what I mean? You have the nucleus, if you will, using a scientific term. You have the nucleus of everything, but you have all these other kind of like parts of people in the area that are going to contribute to it, and it's really important to do that. So that's another thing I always tell writers too as well.
Wow.
Have a good support system.
Right. And then if you have all of that, then the marketing.
Exactly. Well, that's a whole different thing.
Okay, but like we're just like, for everybody out there that's thinking of writing a book, we're just going to tell you the nitty-gritty here today of really what's involved. Because I talked to,
by the way, I have to put this out there.
Put it out there.
As above, so below. This is part of like my witch sort of like merchandise today that I brought
merchandise.
With me. Yeah, so this is like a common expression that Wiccans use, as above, so below. So I just to bring this today So
when we're talking about marketing, are you going to be marketing these on your website? That's next for you, Patrick. Well, we have to have Wiccan stuff that people can order.
If we do that, then we'll have to be my own merch, which is like, for example,
go ahead, show everyone your. Okay, this is great.
Yeah, see my shirt here.
Okay, keep going. All right. There we go. That's the cover. All right. With a hot guy. Now, this is what Patrick writes about. Not just the supernatural. It's got the hat guy on it there. Yeah, exactly. And this is Bedfordshire Warlock.
Yeah, this is the one that just got released a couple weeks ago.
And this is the newest one.
Exactly. Okay. But I got something for a friend of mine, actually. She sent it to me as a lovely gift. With it, that started the whole thing by putting the cover of Sermon on there, and then there's always a quote from like one of the authors. Like that's my
a gripping and exhilarating ride. That was one of the quotes. I read that quote.
Yeah, and this is my editor, Leah. So I got my own merch. Yeah, so maybe that will be the
marketing. That's what it's all about. So let's talk about
start winning awards. Maybe people like what my merch. You never know.
I want to talk about the genre that I've noticed out there. Right, Supernatural's been very hot for a while. Gay characters weren't hot. You weren't. Mm-hmm. Now I am actually seeing books and plays that are bringing in gay characters.
Yeah.
You were one of the first people I interviewed actually that did that on the other show. So, what do you think it's important?
Well,
why now?
Why now? Well,
I
think one, especially what's going on politically in our country right now, and how LGBTQ plus people.
The potential of being ostracized,
exactly, and all these
targeted,
so many like there's so many laws now, and there's so many things like that people can be voting on, and all these horrible things about.
They're horrible things.
Well, and it's mostly about the trans community, but they're part of our community, and so it's kind of like, and when they get attacked, we all get attacked. So it's kind of like, yeah. So I think it's a really important time to do this. But honestly, as a young boy looking at, all these things that fascinated me, there were no gay characters that were part of all of these horror films and supernatural things, with the exception of, and of course you're probably gonna laugh,
of what Pee-wee's
Paul Lynn and Bewitched. I mean, it was Uncle Arthur was such a gay character,
right?
And the fact that Agnes Moorehead was also there, who was an out lesbian. I mean, you would never know that.
People didn't know that, and they were just really, really great characters. But you're right. So let's go back to when Patrick was a little kid. Did you know you were gay?
Well, it's interesting because I knew that I was different, but it's one of those things, again, when you are not voiced on what it is to be different, it's kind of like, well, what does that mean? Well, I like boys and I like girls, but I don't want to be like kissy face with girls, and
kissy. I like that kissy.
I don't want to be kissy face with boys, but I know I don't want to be kissy face with girls. You know what I mean? And then, of course, puberty happens, and then
you're growing up, and there's no characters in all the books that you read that are there for you,
or movies.
You don't want to be You don't want to be kissy face with them, but who do you identify with?
Right.
And is there something not right about you because it's not in TV, it's not in books? It's just not there.
Exactly.
And fast forward to now, where we're seeing the emergence of these characters.
We are seeing it. We're seeing a lot more. I think it's really an exciting time for especially Gen Z. I mean, I think that the millennials got a lot of this, but the Gen Z are really one of the most amazing parts of this, or amazing things about this generation, is their openness to everything.
Right.
They've been exposed to all of this, and it means nothing, no difference to them, sexuality, your religion, or your skin color, and they're so colorblind and everything else.
I like to just say, as people, they're just fluid. They're just undulating, fluid, and you're absolutely right.
Absolutely, and I'm a little jealous of that because they get these characters. They get these characters.
Right.
So it was important to me that when I started writing, I was like, all right, well, I am not going to write a book like all the other books I ever read or all the movies and television I ever said. I said, no, my protagonists are going to be gay people, and whether that means that they're going to be gay, male gay, or if they're going to be lesbian, or they're going to be questioning.
Right.
In fact, interestingly enough, the book that I am now, I sent to my my editor, and she's looking at it now, is about a guy who has never had a same-sex relationship in his entire life. All of a sudden, now he's attracted to a man.
Right.
And like, well, what is this about? So that was something else I thought was really, again, the questioning part. But really what it comes down to, and we talked about this when we said querying earlier, I thought it was very important to make sure that people see that there is the queer perspective on all of this.
Right.
People have approached me, like, for example, people that in my church that have read this, and they're like, come up to me, they're like, we had no idea. We had no idea that you have to go through this when you go to church or when you feel like you're being judged.
Thank you. By doing what you're doing, that is a great way to communicate, especially with what's going on now. Because a lot of those people that had no idea, they vote.
Yeah, exactly.
I love people that, they have gay friends and yet they belong to organizations that are clearly anti-gay, but we have a lot of them out in Pennsylvania and in upstate New York. It doesn't connect that they're voting against the very people that they say are their friends. Exactly. It's harmful to them.
They don't, it's not that, and I wouldn't say it's ignorance necessarily. I just that they don't understand the extent of what happens. You know what I mean? Like,
thank you.
So when we are visible like this, and in an environment, so one of the things also I think about my books that people are more relaxed about is because there is that supernatural element to it. So it's kind of like,
I love it.
Yeah. So they're having fun with it, but it's also not so real. You know what I mean? But that being said, all of my human characters all go by natural laws. Everything that happens to them happens in terms of natural laws. I don't believe in alternative facts. We don't need to go into that. We know what that's about. But it's kind of like they are rooted in that. And so when like in Servant, when Mitch and Buck go to church for the first time because they're investigating what's happened with this group called the Congregation, and the remnants of this group, the Congregation, goes to this church. They're both freaking out because they're like, we're going to church. We're going to church.
Right. We're doing this, right?
We were raised in church. We know what happened to us. We know how, and one of them is from the Southern, a background. Mitch is from a Southern background. So he knows the persecution that happened in a lot of Southern churches, not all of them, but a lot of them. And they're going there. And so people at my church are like, we had no idea this went on. I said, absolutely.
But what a great way to reach them. Church is something they know. Exactly. Now you've got two gay characters that are going to, and what's their experience?
Well, they go there and they're like, and they're approached very, welcoming. They're welcomed, and so as they're doing their research, trying to figure out what happened with this ghost character that's in. I won't spoil because you got to read.
No spoilers. You got to get the book.
Got to get the book. But in that scene, it is, and there's several scenes that go back to the church, and it's kind of like they basically, not only are they trying to help this other young man who was killed, they're trying to figure out why he would have been killed, why he was killed, how he was killed, where he is, all that sort of thing. They're finding through seances. But at the same time, they're also resurrecting their own fears and their own,
absolutely,
and how how they respond to this. And there's a time in that book later on where you're thinking, oh, this is very kind of very happy and very kind of like not realistic. Well, they get smacked in the face.
And they get smacked in the face with reality.
Smacked in the face with reality later on.
So this is very interesting to me that I have to ask you this. You are a man of science. Yep. Your degree is in neuroscience and anatomy?
Yep, anatomical sciences.
Anatomical science. That is very, very hardcore.
Yeah.
Where do ghosts come in all of this for you? This is like, it's kind of like a left brain, right brain thing, but I never heard left brain, right brain when it comes to science versus supernatural.
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you say that.
You're a rare bird.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, whole life.
I don't know the half of it.
What do you mean somebody as big as you doesn't play football?
Right.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times.
Yeah, right.
Well, because I have like this kind of like really strong sort of like self, where I want to make sure that I'm self-survival, that I'm not going to be like hurt. Anyway, no, I won't go into all that. But again, this is like, I don't know what it is. It's like I've always been really fascinated. Like I said, Dark Shadows. That fascinated me when I was a kid.
I love. By the way, Barnabas. I love Dark Shadows. That was one of my. I used to run home after school to watch that.
Exactly,
I was like totally hooked on that. But it is interesting because many people that are turned on by that, like myself included. I grew up telling my mother I was going to go to Africa. I grew up in the Bronx. She's like, this kid's crazy. What do I do with her? And by the time I was 20 years old, I had gotten myself through a study program in a village called Ife to study Shango, the god of thunder. Wow. And I saw spirit things there. I saw all the things that you can't explain. But from a little kid, I was oriented towards that. Look at the degree you have. I mean, those are tough degrees. You have to be oriented. Was there ever like a battle in your head that, you were learning all this science stuff and this is what you were going to teach out there? Yeah. And yet in your own world, you knew that spirits existed?
Well, and this was something that we talked about a little bit at that party, that you were like, well, how does this all mix with you? I said, well, as a scientist, I can tell you, for example, like how a process goes. Like, for example, like embryonic development. Like we can talk about how the cells divide and how DNA and it splits and all that sort of stuff. And then you're saying, well, how does it come? Well, my belief is, and this also goes in with my faith, is that there is a guiding hand, a creator that basically makes sure that process continues.
Well, that's the religious aspect of it, which is also the spiritual aspect of it.
Which is also the supernatural.
It can be the supernatural. So how, like, when I'm sure you went to like scientific conferences and stuff like that. Did you ruffle feathers?
What?
Patrick Field, feather ruffler, odd bird. Did you?
There we go. Rare bird.
Right, rare bird, odd bird, feather
What else is like, okay, what other avian sort of like, you know,
No, but
characteristics?
did you ruffle feathers because of your?
Yeah, you know what?
Because for a scientist, you do encompass the other side,
Mhm.
and they don't like. I know scientists.
Well, and the funny thing is like, and it's interesting you said that because my scientific brain was never about like I'm going to go into a laboratory and sit there and watch something. Of course, I had to do that for my PhD, but you can't escape that. But I was not interested in doing that for the rest of my life, like sitting in a laboratory and like looking at specimens or looking at some kind of like chemicals doing yada yada
like
yada
why,
yada
yeah.
why. So my thing was about how do I teach it? That's where I really looked at it. Like I love neuroscience in the sense that I love teaching about it to
Communication.
other people. Yeah, and then there's where my acting ability,
right?
My background, my acting background also comes in. But I was really interested, and so then my research just naturally went into what we call the pedagogical, which is like how do you teach it? And so that's where I really had my niche, like in the sense that no, I'm not going to come up with like some kind of new process or some new discovery, but I'm going to be able to come up with something in which students that are studying medicine or that want to go into occupational therapy or physical therapy, how do I reach them with this same material and make it easier for them to understand it? Like, how can I teach it to them? And so what I came up with was called case studies. And case studies are basically stories with a message.
Right.
You see where this is going?
Photographers do case studies all the time.
Story with a message.
Story with a message.
This is where writing comes in. So there's where that's where writing also came in.
A very interesting way of going about it. But also it's you're a communicator.
Yeah.
And that's what you're telling me.
Yeah, very much. It's a very big.
That was the big thing for you.
It's a very big communication type in the sciences. And the thing is really different is that everything has to be grounded in facts.
Right.
So everything I had to do had to be teaching you something factual, whatever it may be, which can still be very interesting. So that's kind of where it was all sort of started. And then, but I was like, a couple of times, I think I told you this, I wrote one time and was accepted into a journal, a very well-known journal
scientific
of education.
journal,
The scientific educational journal was the National Science Teachers Association accepted, which is a very big deal.
No, I would think that's hardcore just by the name.
It's a primary source, it's a primary journal. And I don't need to explain all that, what that means, but and after I got accepted and I was going through the editorial process like I do
just
now,
like for the book.
Exactly. And one of the comments that I got from the editor was, could you use less flowery language?
Well, that's the writer in you,
exactly.
Right? Exactly.
And see, I think that's where also, like, in terms of, well, okay, great, so I'll pull it back and make it more boring. But I was like, more direct. But then at the same time, it was like, then I started like playing around with, what if I bring this in, and what if I bring this in? And I think that was the germ that actually finally let me go. Like, you know what? Once I'm stopped like
teaching, I need to write a book.
And the scientific writing, I want to write what I want to write. Right. And that's when the supernatural started coming in.
Right. But then also, let us talk the experience. You move into an old house that's haunted. Was that your first experience with your ghost's name is Henry?
Yeah, well, that's the name that we've given. Yeah.
Okay.
Because my husband and I both have seen the shadow of this entity, and it's clearly male.
It's a male shadow.
Yeah, it's very tall and very thin, and I mean it could be female, but I don't see. I don't see anything that would be reminiscent of maybe a different time that would give that kind of appearance.
How soon from when you moved into the house did Henry make his presence known?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I've been wanting to ask you that.
Yeah. Well, because when we first bought it, we were still living in Manhattan. So we only were out there on the weekends and on the summers because we both are educators. And not a lot happened in the first couple of years, I don't think. We moved in 2005.
Full time.
When we started being there longer, that's when
Henry wasn't so happy about that.
Well, either that or he was really happy that we were there, and now we get to interact with us.
And maybe he was on good behavior when you were there on the weekends. Now Henry can let it all hang out.
Yeah. Well, and I think I discussed this with you again earlier. When there is you want to call it frisson, you know what I mean, like this friction in the air, like whether that be like something like there is, people are arguing, and that it could be, my husband and myself or other people in the house, or there's a child who's crying or something like
It's
that.
a reaction to emotion.
Exactly.
Intense
It's
emotion.
something intense emotion brings him out. Really, yeah. So it's almost like when we have those kind of moments, like, there's some kind of really like, like a very dear friend of ours died last year, he was young. And there was a lot of grief and tension and emotional. Henry was, or our friend was there, like very much like, giving us signs.
Very prominent. What were some of the signs?
Well, one of the things that happened, and it didn't make it into Servant, which will make it into the prequel to Servant, which will be written someday.
and Servant, which book that was your?
Servant is the one that's based on the ones that happened in our house.
Right.
Servant. And it's going to be, the sequel is going to be from Gladys's point of view. She's the psychic.
She's the psychic that was in Servant,
exactly.
The book, right?
So
and she's one of your favorite characters.
I love her.
Okay.
I love her. Yes,
well, if you turn this into a screenplay or a theatrical piece, I want to play Gladys.
You would be awesome.
I would be amazing.
You would be an awesome Gladys. I would do that in a heartbeat. Or if it becomes an audiobook, I will have you.
Oh my God, I would love.
You get to read for her. So that's where it's going to go with her. But here's something that will fit into it. This was something that happened last fall. So it's September, almost a year to the time.
This experience.
Yeah, this experience, and this is we're still kind of still coming back from the pandemic. We're still doing Zoom things. We're all sort of like we're getting out there more, but there's always we're still doing a lot of Zoom stuff. And so my husband was downstairs in the downstairs bedroom where a lot of the activity happens. And he had done a Zoom call previously in the week. And so, and a couple of days later, I go in there just to straighten up something or get something. And I walk in and it is like 100 degrees in this room. And I'm like, what in the hell? And I look over and we have on the side of the wall, we have one of those old time, thermostat. You've got to turn it. It's not electronic. You can't just push a button or something. You literally have to turn this thing. And I'm looking at it and it's fully cranked. And I'm going like, what in the hell? And the first thing I do is I walk in my husband, man, I'm like, did you leave the heat on? And why would you leave the heat on? It was like 85 degrees, and even the day that he did the Zoom call, he looks at me like, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, the heat was on in there.
Yeah, spirit souls do that. They'll mess with thermostats and things like that.
And so that was a very big one though. That was a really profound kind of, here I am. Yeah. I'm still here.
Right.
And then there was a couple things. We had this thing with this, can opener that disappeared. We were going out one night, and I know I put this in. When you're like, okay,
you put that can opener.
I had to put it in that bottle opener. Had to be in there because we were going somewhere and we had bottles of beer, and I didn't know how we were going to be able to open them if we didn't have it. I know I put it in there. We go to the event, it's not there.
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, well then see, and this is where
because spirits will do that. They will mess with you.
Yeah. But first, my scientific mind has to say, okay, I have to eliminate all of the other sort of
that's science.
Exactly.
Eliminate the variables,
eliminate the variables, eliminate all of the possible. So I said, okay, well, maybe it fell out of the bag. All right, great. So looked all around the car, not there. All right, not there. All right. Because when we got into the place, it was not there. So I thought, well, maybe it fell out of the car. Not in the car.
Yeah, right, because you're trying to apply logic.
Exactly. Not around the car. I'm like, it's not there. Okay, whatever. And it wasn't like it was just this little metal, bottle opener. It meant nothing. It was just basically there, utilitarian. It was there for a reason, but it didn't have any sentimental value. There was nothing about it, So I forgot all about it. And well, actually, that's not true because we went home and I said, you know what? Let me see if it's around the place where I put the bag.
Right. That would make sense.
Nowhere on the floor, not on the island of the kitchen. I'm like, all right, it's gone. Whatever. Don't worry about it. 3 days later,
wow!
I come home and there it is sitting right on top of the kitchen island. And I was like, where did this come from? So I asked my husband, he's like, yeah, I found it. Guess where it was? And I was like, and then when you hear that, again, this is like that whole thing, like in the morning when you have guests who's like, so can we tell you about something that happened? Right. Like all of a sudden the hair goes up on the back of your neck. Right. Like, okay, where did you find it? upstairs in our bedroom underneath of the dresser.
Wow.
So I'm like,
wow.
And again, the scientist in me is like, okay, so
How
maybe
did
it slip
there?
into my pocket and then
Right.
slip out of it. No,
You couldn't explain it.
no, none. So those kind of things happen, and so that will be the fodder that will be utilized in the next book.
In the next book going forward. I have to tell you, Patrick, while we're talking, Pangea is a very charged place. There historically, I heard from people that the back part of where we are, this building, there had been a cemetery back there. That I don't know, but there people that come in here can feel the amount of spirits. The whole time we've been talking, this is something that never happened before. The shade has been moving the entire time, and I've never had that happen before. So
I'm a magnet.
You are no. So that's what I was going to get to. I'm going to get to that because this was a quote said about Patrick. With so many vivid accounts, one might wonder if Field himself might have been a warlock in another time.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's one of those things like, honestly, that character is Dorian. That's the one that's in Bedfordshire Warlock.
That's in Bedfordshire, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there is, in the beginning, when he starts talking about, he always knew that he had these kind of interesting sort of, we call them powers, but abilities, I guess. Like he was able to tell when people would be coming, and he'd say, well, they're right around the corner.
Right.
And they're like, well, how do you know that? I said, well, he just did, Or there was a couple of times when he was like, he thinks that he moved something with his head, with his mind, whatever. Well, something happened to me when I was I'm talking about like way back in puberty, and I was living in our house. I was growing up, and I was downstairs. I was the one person that was in the downstairs bedroom, and one morning, I looked at this hurricane lamp that was on the dresser. And I looked at it and I looked at it and looked at it. Of course, I've always been fascinated with like telekinesis. And
I am too. Uri Geller. Of course.
Yeah. And I looked at it and I looked at it and I was like, I was laying down in bed and I was laying on my pillow and I was like looking at it. I was going, what would happen if I really thought about it and then maybe try to turn it on?
Don't tell me it turned on.
And this ornate, this hurricane had a very ornate switch on it. And I mean, it wasn't something
it just turned on.
It just turned by itself and turned the light on. And so I thought, did I do that? Or did I wish something that could do that would do it for me?
But either way you look at it, Patrick, how do you go from that to walking into a classroom and teaching neuroscience? You understand what I'm saying? These are like, it's like you would have to be in your brain half one thing and half another. The ability to do that.
Right. Well,
but we all know the film Carrie and what happened. That was but that was an extreme example of what you're talking about. The willing.
Well, here's interesting also. So typically, most of the scientists that you will talk to, neuroscientists, say that we use about 25% of our brain. There's been obviously people like, Einstein probably used up to 40% of their brain. And actually, when you look at their brain, interestingly enough, it does not look like everybody else's brain.
I have to bring you back this way. You're lifting to port.
Sorry. Sorry. And it looks different. It has a lot more density in a specific area. I won't go into all of that, but it was very different from other human brains when they actually looked at it after post-mortem. So there is a very strong belief that because we don't utilize the majority of our brain, what does the rest of our brain have to be able to do?
The ability. You're talking about that ability, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And then something also that happened, and we talked about this the other day as well, when I was doing my research, and my research was very much specific, looking at brain mapping, looking at a specific area of the brain, and we looked at it from 3 ways to be able to get sensory information to that part of the brain: visual, auditory, hearing, as well as tactile, sense of touch. And so we were able to identify neurons in this area that were responsive to this kinds of sensory inputs. But once in a while, we would come across a neuron that didn't respond to sensory input, but the neuron responded to something.
Right. So what was it responding to?
It wasn't responding to anything that was involved with the visual system, the auditory system, or the
So
tactile
then
system.
it's got to be that thing we call it, what, the sixth sense? It's got to be that.
Something like that, or aura, or energy
Or
fields,
energy
or something
fields.
like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, now we call all of that, right, energy fields, and energy can't be created or destroyed. It just exists. And when we get to talking about energy, there's only a small percentage of that we really understand.
Exactly. And so, like, for example, like when I do this, when I touch you like this, the molecules in my
Oh my
hand
God, he's got molecules.
touch the molecules in your
Right.
skin. We're actually part of each other. On a molecular level, we are together like that.
Right.
And then when I do this, because there's more attraction to my molecules to each other versus your molecules are attracted more to, that's why we don't stay together.
Right.
But what you say, like when you talk about like Reiki and things like that, energy fields, that's what it is. It's about energy coming off, like the electrons jumping off of all of the.
Well, can you feel that in people? Like, can you
some
do
people
that?
can, yes. Some
I'm
people
one of
can.
the people that can.
Okay, I don't know if I've ever actually really tried to do that, but
like I can totally feel it coming off of your hand.
Okay.
All right, hold on, and I can totally feel it coming off of your shoulder. It's about about an inch above, and I can feel it.
Wow. Well, there, and see, and I
come from Scotch Irish people.
Well,
My grandmother came to this country and read tea leaves. Okay, we've been woo woo from way back, woo woo from way back. So we have a couple of people who have tuned in on. Thank you. I think they are on YouTube. Rose Trentman, who's amazing. She loves that there's two endings. She's great on getting the book published. And Rose says you're a rare being. And coming from Rose, that's something. She has very high standards. And today's her birthday, by the way. Love Dark Shadows. And she said Henry is coming out of the shadows when there is tension present. And that's very apropos because it's a heightening of emotion, and that's what brings him out.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you something very odd. Alan was very powerful energy, an artist. It was in the pictures he shot like nobody could, and I believe a lot of it was energy. But one of the things that would happen every now and then, there wouldn't be enough going. He always needed so much stimulus going on around him. He needed chaotic energy.
Wow.
And I'm like, what's going on with you? You look like you're not feeling great. He's like, I'm bored. I hated when he said that because every time he said that, something bad would happen.
Oh no, yeah.
It was not a good thing. And I would tell him, whatever you do, don't say that, because there's something within you, whether it's energy or whatever you want to call it, that would make a negative thing happen. In the same way, Rose is right, creating tension or creating mayhem. If the two of you arguing or having voices argue, or a high emotion state, a friend dies, you're mourning the friend, the spirit can feel that, and it will bring the spirit out. Yeah. How can people find your books? And can you go through them one by one for us, please?
All right. So, Servant is the first one that was published. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Indie Books. Also, in terms of ebooks, you can get it through Kindle, Nook, iTunes.
Cool.
All those, and again, my publisher, the Wild Rose Press, is very good about going through all the major distributors. Walmart is even one of them. I'd be like,
cool.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm a Walmart shopper. Now I know I can get Patrick Field's book in Walmart. If
you get a gift certificate for Walmart, you could use that online. So Servant is that book. The Bedfordshire Warlock came out July 29th. So that's available also through the same distributors.
Okay.
And I have the same publisher. But what's interesting about Bedfordshire, if I could just do a little sideline, I've gotten a lot of attention from these other outlets that I never got from Servant. I don't know if it's because I have two books or because this book has like struck a nerve with people. I'm not sure, but I'm getting different websites that are interested in representing me different. Like there's another group called Indie Lit that wants me to be part of their bookstore. I mean, and a lot of these things are all free for authors, which is really nice.
That's really great. And it
the royalty structure stinks. I mean, it's the worst. You make nothing of these books. But I'm not saying that's just my publisher.
You love writing.
Everybody else. Everybody is exactly the same way.
You love writing. So I was going to ask you, do you think the interest in the Bedfordshire Warlock is the fact that it's got to do with an actual entity in there, because you've got the character, you've got the entity, you've got
or maybe it's the cover, like with the
oh my
sexy
God.
guy on the front. You know what I mean?
It all excuse me, that's what it all boils down to in the end. A good-looking guy with his shirt off.
Right.
What have we come to in society?
I know. I don't
Oh,
know.
come on, you deliberately made that decision. You didn't
but-
put a warlock on there like with a
No.
cape or whatever.
Oh, no,
He's
no,
like
no,
a
no.
great-looking. Who posed for the book? I need.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, well, I told them that was one of the great things about my publishing company. They want all the input for the cover, and I told them this is exactly what I wanted. So they created it based on what I wanted, and everything was exactly the way that I wanted. Now,
but they didn't use a model per se. You think
no,
it was an illustration?
Art, they probably clip art and stuff like that. But it's fine because it works. But that's what I wanted. I wanted exactly what was on there. But interestingly enough, I was at a book signing the other day, and this customer came up, and she was like, she bought both of them. She bought both the books, and she said, I said, I don't know what your books are about. I buy books based on covers, and I love the covers of your books.
I love it.
And that's what she said. And that's the reason why I'm buying them.
And I think, well, you really hit on something. I really think that's half of it, because unless they read about you, unless people take the time to do that, or they come to your reading at Barnes and Noble, or they read a review or something, they're often, if you go into a bookstore and you're buying a book blind, the cover will be the thing that turns you on. It's the thing that makes your hand go over and grab it.
Exactly.
Let's all have shirtless guys on all the books. Yes.
Well, we were talking the other day. I said, if you look at the cover, the original cover of Interview with a Vampire, it's a gold foil cover with just like Interview with a Vampire. Like that to me was the most unexciting, interesting kind of cover. And I was like, if someone had not told me that it was such a great book, I would have been like,
but wasn't she already established when
she was at that? Right. Well, it was she had a couple other things, but that was really her big breakthrough, the Vampire Chronicles. And of course, and again, just to shout out,
here we go. Let's do it.
I have to do this. This is the Teatro de Vampires. I am a huge Anne Rice fan. So I have been wearing this all over New York City today, coming here. It's 85 degrees outside.
Patrick doesn't care.
It's like, what did I say? And you would know this because you're modeling. It's like, you suffer for fashion.
This is it. Beauty knows no pain is what we say.
I suffer for my fashion. But
now you love Anne Rice. Who else do you love?
Joe Hill.
Yes.
Joe Hill, and he does not get anywhere near the amount of like fame that his father, who is Stephen King.
Right.
Exactly.
But that is like, he could be as good, but I mean, like, how do you do that?
Well,
when your father is Stephen King.
Exactly. How do you reinvent yourself when your father's like the father of horror?
The master, let's say the master of horror.
Exactly. And keeps on cranking them out too.
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
And I like Stephen King, don't get me wrong, but Joe Hill is one of these gifted writers. He also did Lock and Key. I don't know if you know about that.
I don't know.
That's Netflix. It's a series on Netflix. It was based on a graphic novel. So that really pulls in like the younger folks too. So he's very applicable to all different generations. Which
is great.
But he wrote this book called Horns, where this character wakes up one morning and he's literally got horns growing out of his head. And he's like, what is this about? He's becoming a demon.
Right. And morphing into a demon.
Exactly. And what was brilliant about it was because what Joe Hill took was what we think of demons and what they are. Well, guess what? Demons can hear human thoughts. So why are they so nasty to humans? Because humans lie to them all the time. They'll tell them one thing and they'll be thinking something else. Wow. So they get angry. And so that was his take on it. That's why demons are so personified as being evil. Because guess what? Because they're going crazy because you're telling them one thing. So the hypocrisy is like, it's always there.
Wow.
And so that's why they get so angry. And to me,
so that's what happened to one of the presidential candidates. Now I understand.
Yeah, well,
makes all
trying to say it political, but it's like, I know, but especially where we live.
Yeah, right.
Be really careful. But that to me was such a cool, fresh take on the whole thing.
Well, it's a different take on demons.
And then he did
it's almost like defending the demon. The demon has a,
Exactly. And then he did a whole fresh take on the vampire sort of, genre with Nosferatu. He's a really interesting writer. But Anne Rice to me is like, I can read Anne Rice, the way that she writes about
it's how she writes.
Oh my God, the way that the detail and all the beautiful things. And my editor will say, like, for example, there's way too much detail here. We don't need this. We don't need that. But I model it after her because I love that about her. Like she really puts you there. Like you are there. Like the Théâtre de Vampires on the back of my jacket there. Like I remember reading in one of her books. Well, it was either Lestat or the Interview of the Vampire. 3 pages she devoted just to describing the Théâtre de Vampires. And some people will be like, oh my God, that's way too much. I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly what this looks like now.
I know. See, that's different strokes for different folks. I get lost in the sauce when there's that much detail. I can't even move it along. And I don't know what I'm reading.
For my books. I have a lot of detail.
I'm excited for your book. Tell us your website.
It is Patrick Field Author, AUTHOR after patrickfield.com.
And your Instagram.
It is at Patrick Field Author. So
are there any other ways you want people to reach you?
Well, you can try me on Facebook too. I mean, I'm listed by Patrick Field, but there's a ton of us.
Yeah, so, it's a common name. Loved having you on here. Very excited about the kinds of books that you're writing. I think I told you I would love to put together a panel, finding more and more writers that are doing books, including gay characters, LGBTQ characters. We need to call attention to that, right? You're right. It was missing in fiction for a really long time, or it was cloaked in something else. So it's important to get that
Clive
out
Barker
there.
Is the only one that ever wrote about any kind of queer characters, or queer perspective. And so, I feel like, interestingly enough, a medium told me one time when I was working at my old place that I worked at, and there were mediums that came there, and she said, "You are about enlightenment." He said, because I asked her, I said, is this thing with writing, is this, how is this going to go? And she said, yes. He says, it's very important. You are here to enlighten people. And I'm not saying like, I'm like, like this.
No, I got it. But you look what you're doing. You're writing, and that's how you're doing it.
Right. And exactly. And you're reaching people that you normally wouldn't reach. And you're also writing in a niche that's very different. Nobody writes like you, And
but devil's advocate, I use that word lightly. You were teaching neuroscience, and you were reaching people that way too.
True.
So you were that was a form of enlightenment.
And it's interesting.
This is just a different way of doing it.
And it's interesting because I'm trying to. Those people that knew me as the neuroscientist who taught, for 25 years in university, I'm trying to be like, hey, this is this books that I'm writing now like this, and some people got it and picked it up. And then some people I think were just being nice. They're like, well, we know you, so we're going to buy it. But they weren't really,
You don't think they
and that's okay. That's okay. Everybody has, I'm very, very introspective about what I write, what I read too. So I'm not going to complain about that.
Right. But. Well, we're so wonderful to have everything that you share with us on here was really out of the box, Patrick. And I love that. Let's get a picture of us together. I love doing these on the computer. Great. And I wish you such luck. Do you have any book signings coming up or ones that you know about in the fall that we can share with people here?
Well, there's Milford Readers and Writers that's coming up.
Okay, you're going to be
14th of September. I'm going to be at that. And then I actually have at the Cooperage in Honesdale, I've got my own the 21st.
Oh, you have to send me the schedule.
2:30. Yeah, from 1 to 2:30 at the Cooperage in Honesdale on Main Street. I'm going to have a whole event. So I'm going to be presenting and doing a Q&A. And
this
signing.
Is great.
Yeah,
great. You're going to do the signing, and this is going to be for the Bedfordshire Warlock.
Yeah, but
the other books will be there as well. Great. I would totally love to. This is all on your website. People can go to your website and see your schedule of events. Fabulous. We can't wait. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And Patrick, best of luck with everything that you're doing. Oh, and say hi to Henry from me. That's the ghost. Bye, everybody.
Bye.